Well, he says he doesn't care if they call witnesses, but it might not be good if they call John Bolton. Hi, this is Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle now. And Bill, as this impeachment trial goes on, we're always trailing a little bit because we pre-record this show, and the trial itself is not supposed to last very long. It looks like they're going to allow the Democrats from the House to present their case for 3 consecutive 8-hour days, followed by the president's defense and then closing statements. In any case, we are now in day 1 of when they're going to start presenting that case. Yesterday devoted mostly to rules, but by the time this posts, we'll really be heading up day 2. I want to deal specifically with something that President Trump was asked about and answered during a trip to Davos, Switzerland, where they said, was he concerned that the Senate might vote to call witnesses? And Bill, he said he respects the vote of the Senate or the choice of the Senate, and that he really doesn't care either way, whether they call witnesses or not. So there's 2 problems with that, Bill. If John Bolton testifies, the president said, number 1, he was involved in national security discussions because he's the national security advisor, and he is privy to some of President Trump's views about foreign leaders, some of which may be negative. Secondly, John Bolton didn't leave the administration on good terms. Now, this is what the president is saying. This isn't what critics of the president are saying. Bill, does it strike you as kind of an odd comment from a guy who said, first of all, let's get the trial over. Now he says it's okay if they string it out and it's okay if they call witnesses. But let me just tell you honestly what I think. If you bring John Bolton in, he may tell you about world leaders I don't like, and he didn't leave on good terms, so he may say bad things about me.
First of all, if I understand the process correctly, the House comes up with articles of impeachment that are essentially the indictment, and the Senate then weighs the evidence. If I understand the process correctly, if I understand the process correctly, this is like having a witness come in while the jury is debating, while the jury is deliberating. The prosecution says, "Oh, we may or may not call some more witnesses." Is that more or less?
Bill, I don't think that that's the only way to see this. In fact, I think the way the defenders of calling witnesses, and some of those are so-called moderate Republicans, the way they see it is that the House has served as kind of the district attorney who proffers charges against the accused, and then they bring that to trial. Right. And during the trial, the defense and the prosecution are allowed to call witnesses, not only people that have already been deposed, but also people that would buttress the case toward those 2 articles of impeachment in this case.
Okay. Well, then if that's the case and John Bolton testifies, we'll find out what John Bolton has to say. I suspect that if John Bolton had a smoking gun, we would have heard about it earlier. I cannot imagine that John Bolton was not at least questioned somewhat about this, if not in an informal way. So if Donald Trump is concerned that John Bolton may reveal that Donald Trump has colorful opinions about world leaders, then that may prove to be embarrassing to Donald Trump or not, depending. But I don't see how that impacts the case. And if they want to go down this witness road, then it's time to subpoena Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, both.
Well, Bill, I think it's interesting here, not just that, not on the merits of whether or not to call John Bolton as a witness or to call any witnesses for that matter, but the fact that President Trump, who is currently under impeachment on trial before the U.S. Senate, says, I don't know if you should call this guy because he knows that I have bad views of some world leaders, and he didn't leave under the best of circumstances, so you don't want a disgruntled former employee talking about you in a public forum. Doesn't that strike you as kind of a strange reasoning that he would say publicly?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, you basically he's trying to soften whatever negative impact Bolton might have. We don't know whether Bolton's going to have a negative impact or not. It's kind of at this point you have to it's all just pure speculation, obviously. So we can come up with 2 scenarios. One scenario where Bolton testifies and it does not do particular harm to Donald Trump's case, in which case they've shot their Bolton and there's nothing else to do. The other case would be John Bolton, or there's 3, I guess. John Bolton offers testimony that appears to support the charges, or at least confirm some of the outer edges of them, something along those lines. And then the final case is that John Bolton drops a neutron bomb that is absolutely earth-shattering to the degree that it essentially proves beyond any reasonable doubt that Donald Trump committed grave abuse of power. So I don't know which one of those it's going to be. I suspect it's not going to be number 3, because I suspect that if that smoking gun were out there somewhere on the scene, anywhere on the scene, it would have been turned up by now. So I suspect what Donald Trump was doing was just kind of, preparing people for the fact that this might get embarrassing. And we don't know, when he says, we don't know what that means exactly. And I think he kept it purposely vague. Maybe he said that he thinks Elizabeth II dresses in a funny way. Who knows?
So essentially, he's making 2 arguments in a backhanded way. Number one is the argument from executive privilege, saying that a close advisor to the president shouldn't be brought before a public tribunal to essentially undercut the ability of the president to have his own counsel in a way that is protected so that people can give him honest advice. And then the other one being kind of undercutting John Bolton in advance by saying, well, the guy's a disgruntled former employee.
Well, he's not. To be clear, he didn't exactly undercut him. Look, I think this is the kind of thing where he's doing what just about anybody else would do when you've got potentially bad news on the way. So how's that real estate deal going, Bill? It's going along. We had a few problems, but we'll see how they pan out. I don't know what to say about this, because if it turns out that the obstruction charges are a result of actions Donald Trump took to defend himself against these not only unproven but disproven charges, these charges, that the whole Ukraine thing, the Russian collusion thing, all of it, Scott. I'm just throwing the whole thing into the same basket because that's where it belongs. Then, as I mentioned on the last time on the show, then what we will find is a world where we're back in the days of the French Revolution. I'll accuse you of something. You will defend yourself. I will then look at your defense, and if I find anything in the defense that is unusual or improper, then I'm going to convict you not on the basis of the crime I accused you of. I'm going to convict you on the basis of what you did defending yourself against this crime I'm accusing you of. And that is, well, that's French justice,
Well, Al Capone and Martha Stewart, phone your office, please. Because it is, and this happens a lot, as you know, in the American justice system. But Bill, you brought up the issue of Hunter Biden and perhaps Joe Biden testifying. I was thinking through that this morning, and like you just did with the Bolton testimony, I thought there were a number of possibilities that could come out of this, because the Washington Post is reporting that some Democrats, at least a small group of Democrats, are giving serious consideration to a witness deal where they would exchange Hunter Biden's testimony for John Bolton's testimony. And somebody in that article was quoted as saying, well, this could backfire on the White House. And I thought of a couple of things that could happen. Hunter Biden, who has been basically treated by the conservative media as an incompetent dolt who got his business deal with Burisma in Ukraine through dint only of his father's political position, not of any characteristics or experience of his own. Hunter Biden could get down in front of that Senate group and look competent. So that would be a risk to the Republicans. It might, if you put Hunter Biden and Joe Biden on the stand like that, it might just reinforce the idea that President Trump and the GOP are doing everything they can to undercut President Trump's most likely Democratic rival. So thus reinforcing the central premise of the case. And the other risk is that the Chief Justice of the United States and those who are running the trial could basically say, look, you can bring Hunter Biden in here, but you have to ask him about the charges against Donald Trump. This is not a trial of Hunter Biden or of Joe Biden. You've got to stay focused on the case at hand here. And so that they could wind up bringing them in there and not even being able to question them on the things that Republicans and conservatives would like to see Hunter Biden answer.
Well, all of that is true, but the one lesson I learned from the beginning of whatever experience I've had with the law, and I learned this, I'm sure, on television show. I probably learned it on Perry Mason or something like that, Ironsides. But it's a truism, and it's a very sound one, that you should never, as an attorney, you never ask a question you don't already know the answer to, ever. And parenthetically, you don't ask people who are professional actors to try on gloves unless you know for a fact that this is beyond question.
Well, and as you know, though, under cross-examination, interesting things can happen that you weren't planning when you were so carefully staging your witness encounter.
My point is that if you're going to call Hunter Biden, you had better have you're not going to just call Hunter Biden and do what they've been doing, which is just start fishing. You're going to call Hunter Biden, and if you do call him, you are going to have an absolutely concrete series of questions, one to the other, that's directly dealing with this topic, that Hunter Biden will either have to answer truthfully, in which case he's going to be discredited, or he'll take the fifth, in which case he's discredited, or he'll lie. And and you have to be prepared for the lie. You have to be prepared to provide evidence that he is in fact lying. Now, I don't know anything about the president's defense. I don't know what the thing is. As you've pointed out many times, rightfully so, this is not really a trial in the way that we understand trials. This is more of a hearing, really, I guess. And so, barring photographic evidence of Donald Trump, strong-arming the president of the Ukraine, putting a gun to his head, then the question comes down to, since it's not an actual trial and it's a political event, and it has been from the beginning, what would it take in order for the Republicans in the Senate, enough of them, to flip for a guilty, well, I don't know if guilty is the word, but for them to remove Donald Trump from office? So, in my opinion, based on what I've seen over the course of my adult life, because I didn't pay much attention earlier, the one thing that I will say seems to be true about virtually every politician, not every one of them, but virtually every one of them, is that essentially every single decision they make ultimately comes down to whether or not it's going to affect their ability to stay on the gravy train. And this is especially true in the Senate. So I guess if we want to look at it from a mechanical point of view, what would Bolton have to say in order to have enough Republicans flip to remove Donald Trump from office, which, needless to say, will not only be the end of their political careers, it would cause serious repercussions, I think, throughout the entire country. I'll tell you one thing. If you ask people on the street, what did Donald Trump do in order to get impeached, most people couldn't tell you. And the ones who would tell you that it was abuse of power or obstruction of justice, if you ask them, okay, what did he do? They wouldn't be able to answer you. And that is telling me something. We all know what Richard Nixon did. We all know what Bill Clinton did. We all know what Andrew Johnson did. We don't have any idea about what this thing is about. So if it turns out that this is now the new normal, that we can continue to sift the sand until we can put together enough stray dots to kind of make a crooked line out of it. And then our plan is we're going to go ahead and accuse you of this and watch your defense with a microscope, and anything that you might do in order to defend yourself, then we're going to use as evidence. This is not justice. This is not America. This is not the presumption of innocence. It's not the rule of law. And it's certainly not the Constitution of the United States. If the American people cannot tell you what it is that the president apparently did that is worthy of removing him from office, then he's not worthy to be, then he is not justified removing him from office. If you can go down the street and ask American citizens, we're about to remove the elected president of the United States because why, and they can't answer you, and they can't, because I can't, then you have got a situation that is not an impeachment trial. You've got a political ambush. And I am just getting so bloody sick of this. We did the last show, we were talking about best case scenario. Let me tell you what I think the worst case scenario is. Worst case scenario is that Bolton or somebody else has a bombshell. The Senate votes to remove Donald Trump from office. And I swear to God, if they do, I believe he would be reelected by an enormous landslide in November. I think every single person that cares about the future of this country is going to come out and vote in that. And that's what we're reduced to now. That's what we're reduced to. That's what Nancy Pelosi and the rest of these clowns have done to this country. They've turned impeachment, which is, my God, the president has committed this horrible act, this unbelievable act. I'm stunned. I can't believe that somebody could do something that appalling and then have to deliberate the fate of this thing. We've turned it from that into, let's see what we can dig up, and we'll throw some charges together. And who knows, maybe some of it'll stick, or maybe something new will come up. We'll just see how it goes. If this political circus and this political tricksterism actually gets the results that the people who have launched it intend, then they are going to see something in this country that I have never seen before. And I am telling you, I and millions of other Americans are not just going to sit still and let this coup d'etat happen. We're not. Again, this would be an entirely different conversation, and I would have an entirely different opinion about this if there were charges that were credible, understandable, and clear. But there aren't. So if I and the rest of the American public cannot tell you what the President of the United States actually did in order to have him removed from office, then that's, and when the charges are sent to the Senate, not a single member of the opposition party, not one of the 435 members of Congress, not one Republican, feels like the charges are serious enough for them to warrant an agreement with the impeachment charges. What does that tell you? It tells me that there's nothing here, that there's never been anything here. And if they go through this process, and by the way, the whole witness process is composed of two things. First of all, it's what I've been arguing this whole episode, which is, let's see if we can find something that sticks. And secondly, it's designed to stretch this thing out. Just like Nancy Pelosi sitting on the articles for 3 or 4 weeks or whatever she did. It's all just designed to stretch it out. And if you're going to destroy the office of the presidency, and you're going to destroy the faith of the American people, not only in their government, as in the people that are in the government, but in the entire structure of government. In fact, in the entire concept of the rule of law and the presumption of innocence, if you're ready to throw all of that under the bus in order to try and eke out a win in an election that you really have no chance to win otherwise, then I'm going to have to agree. And I regret feeling this. I genuinely do. But I'm going to have to agree with those guys who are holding up those signs down in Virginia. I would rather be an American than a Democrat.
Well, whichever way this goes, Bill Whittle now will be coming to you 5 days a week, applying time-tested principles to the breaking news of the day. And we can only do that because of the faithful members at BillWhittle.com who contribute from their financial means on a monthly or annual basis, some for as little as $9.95 a month, to make it possible for you to see this at no charge. If you'd like to be part of the kind of people who are spreading these kinds of truths and conversations around the world, then perhaps you should go to BillWhittle.com right now and click that Become a Member link. By the way, you don't have to be a member to join us for our 3-night cruise from the Port of Miami to the Bahamas, where we'll stop one day at a private island and enjoy all the luxury of a Royal Caribbean Navigator of the Seas cruise with the kind of folks that not just people that you agree with, but people that you will fundamentally feel a human connection with, the kind of people who will become your friends, many of them for life. You'll have a chance to interact with the hosts of our programs over casual dining situations and conversations, lots of Q&A, live productions of our shows, and much more. If you haven't yet booked your cruise, go to BillWhittle.com and click on the giant ship and book that cabin today. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.